message on her phone. It spoke of a massage at 7:30, but she never mentioned this to him. Her late nights, mysterious excuses, and new expensive jewelry only deepened his doubts. Unable to ignore the growing tension, he decided to follow her. What he discovered at the spa shattered his world, but was it really betrayal or something more complex? The truth was more shocking than he ever imagined. The husband found out about her happy ending massage. Everything turned out to be not what it seemed. Gerard was sitting in the kitchen, sipping his morning coffee, glancing out the window at the quiet street where cars were already beginning to pass by. The warm sunlight streaming through the blinds promised a good day. Gerard wiped a few drops from his face and looked at the clock. 8:30. Clara would wake up soon. She always woke up before him. It was her routine, starting the day with coffee and then heading out for yoga or a run. However, lately, he noticed that her morning rituals had changed. These were minor changes, but to Gerard, everything seemed significant. She had become more withdrawn, her eyes looked tired, and she kept coming up with new reasons not to stay home in the evenings. Several times, she had come home late at night, and Gerard noticed that each time, a new bracelet appeared on her wrist. It wasn't very noticeable, but Gerard couldn't ignore these details. He didn't think much of it until one morning. He noticed a new silver bracelet on her wrist, adorned with tiny stars that sparkled in the light. "That looks expensive," he remarked, watching Clara pour milk into her cup. "It's from Linda. She bought it over the weekend when we went for a walk," Clara replied without looking up. "Linda? You've never mentioned her before." Gerard raised an eyebrow, trying to appear casual, but he couldn't hide his surprise. "She's from work. We just have lunch together sometimes, that's all," Clara replied briefly, turning away. This struck Gerard as odd because he knew most of her colleagues, but this name was unfamiliar. She began nervously gripping her cup. Gerard noticed. His suspicions only grew. Days went by, and Gerard began noticing even more changes in her behavior. She became more reserved, and when he tried talking to her about their life together, she always found excuses. She interrupted him at every turn, redirecting the conversation to her work problems or new plans for the evening. He couldn't understand why she was acting as if she were avoiding him. It started to bother him, and he decided to pay closer attention to her actions. One evening, when he came home earlier than usual, he saw Clara leaving again. That day, she didn't look her usual self. She was hurried and nervous. Gerard decided it was time to understand what was really happening. When she left, he calmly took her phone and started checking her messages. Most of the messages were clearly from her friends and colleagues, but one message caught his eye. He couldn't explain why it struck him, but its content was clear. "Ready for our session at 7:30 p.m.? Same as always, Monday." It was from an unknown contact signed SG. Gerard recalled he hadn't seen this number before, and the thought of it unsettled him. Why had Clara never mentioned this session? What could it mean? Gerard couldn't let this go unanswered. His heart raced, and he decided he had to do something. He couldn't let these questions remain. When Clara returned home, Gerard was sitting at the table with her phone in his hands. She entered the room and noticed it immediately. Her expression grew guarded. "Were you looking through my phone again?" she asked, but her voice betrayed fear, though she tried to remain calm. "I didn't know you had secrets from me," Gerard replied, not taking his eyes off the phone screen. Clara was no longer as confident as before. She suspected Gerard had figured out something important. Her hand instinctively reached for her hair, but she quickly clenched it into a fist, knowing that words wouldn't save her now. All those changes, all those bracelets, her unexplained nights, it could no longer be hidden. Gerard looked at her with pain in his eyes, and though he tried to stay calm, he couldn't ignore the feeling that something was happening in his life beyond his control. It's nothing," she said, trying to stay composed, but her voice sounded uncertain. "And what is this session you didn't tell me about?" Gerard didn't look away. His voice was calm, but each word hit like a hammer, striking deeper into her consciousness. "It's just a massage. Nothing more." Clara tried to justify herself, but her appearance told a different story. She feared he wouldn't believe her. She feared that all her explanations sounded weak even to herself. "And why didn't you tell me about it before?" Gerard stood still. his gaze piercing as if trying to see the truth hidden behind every word she said. Clara felt increasingly uneasy. She tried to find the right words, but nothing came out. Her demeanor seemed even stranger, and Gerard felt the growing chasm of misunderstanding between them. He didn't know where this would end, but he understood that their lives would never be the same. After that evening, Gerard felt that something had fundamentally changed between him and Clara. Their relationship was no longer as open and simple as it once was. She stopped sharing her problems, and he began to notice more and more inconsistencies in her behavior. Every move she made, every look she gave, seemed significant to him, and he tried to find explanations for all of it. But the more he searched, the more questions arose. One morning, as Clara was heading to work, Gerard, sitting at the kitchen table, noticed another new bracelet on her wrist. This time it was larger, with a big star-shaped pendant, and it seemed even more expensive than the previous one. It couldn't be a coincidence. "What's this new bracelet?" Gerard asked, trying to sound casual. Clara raised her hand, as if oblivious to his gaze. "It's a gift from Linda," she repeated once more. "Linda again? She can't possibly be giving you so many expensive gifts." Gerard felt his words sounded not only suspicious but almost accusatory. "It's not what you think," Clara replied, but her voice wasn't as confident as before. She quickly grabbed her bag and left, leaving Gerard alone at the table. Gerard realized he could no longer just sit and wait. His suspicions were growing stronger, and he couldn't ignore the fact that Clara was hiding something. Thoughts swirled in his mind, each becoming more persistent. That same day, after Clara left for work, Gerard decided to check her phone once again. It was his last attempt to find some kind of explanation. He could no longer deceive himself that all of this was just a coincidence. He couldn't wait to find out if there was something else he hadn't noticed before. This time, he found more messages from the same contact, SG. They were different messages, but all carried the same phrasing. "Tomorrow at 7:30 p.m., as always, don't forget." Gerard couldn't understand what it meant. What were these regular meetings? What happened when Clara went to these sessions? Why hadn't she told him about them? "This doesn't sound like just a massage," Gerard whispered as he read the messages. He felt a deep anxiety building within him. It seemed like there was more to this than just work matters or casual fun. What next? Gerard tried to contain his growing frustration, but couldn't manage it. He couldn't leave this unanswered. That evening, when Clara came home, Gerard met her in the hallway. He looked at her with a confused expression, but in his eyes, there was something she likely didn't expect, anger and disappointment. "You haven't been honest with me again," he said, not giving her a chance to defend herself. Clara froze in place, her eyes filled with fear as she tried to appear calm. "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied, but her voice was noticeably insincere. "You didn't tell me that you regularly attend some sessions and that you meet someone there. This doesn't look like a regular massage, Clara." Gerard could no longer keep it inside. Clara took a step back, her gaze becoming even more confused. "It's not what you think. It's just—" She trailed off, searching for words but finding none. Her expression changed, and she could no longer lie to him. "Who is this, SG? Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Gerard didn't avert his gaze, and his voice grew stronger with every word. "It's not what you think," Clara exclaimed, her face pale, her hands nervously clenched. She didn't know how to escape this situation and felt as if her whole life was beginning to crumble. Gerard stepped forward, closing the distance between them. His voice grew quieter, but the tension in it only increased. "Then explain it to me, Clara. Explain why I should trust your words if you're hiding something so important from me." She looked at him, as if searching for a lifeline, but in his eyes, she could see. He would no longer take her words at face value. Clara nervously drew a breath and, licking her dry lips, softly said, "It's not what you think. SG is just my masseur." "Just a masseur?" Gerard asked sarcastically, folding his arms across his chest. "And that explains the regular messages with the same phrase, as always?" She averted her eyes, avoiding his burning gaze. "This massage, it's for relaxation. I go there to unwind a bit." Gerard was silent for a few seconds, considering her words. Then, as if reaching a decision, he slowly said, "Then I want to go with you. I want to see this salon." Clara reacted sharply. "No, you don't understand. It's a place where I want to be alone. It's my personal space." Her voice started to tremble, and she quickly averted her gaze. This only deepened his suspicions. Personal space? Fine, but there shouldn't be secrets in a marriage, Gerard said coldly. He didn't continue the conversation and left the room, leaving her standing in the middle of the hallway. Only one thought was spinning in his head. He had to find out the truth, no matter what it was. The next morning, Gerard woke up earlier than Clara. He sat in the kitchen, slowly stirring his coffee with a spoon. The night had brought him no peace. He replayed her words over and over in his mind. Clara came downstairs looking tired, but trying to act as if nothing had happened. She greeted him with a brief "good morning" and sat down across from him. "Are you going to your massage today?" Gerard suddenly asked, looking at her over the rim of his cup. Clara hesitated. Her hand trembled as she brought her cup to her lips. "Yes. Why are you asking?" "Just curious." His voice sounded indifferent, but there was a spark of determination in his eyes. This time, Gerard decided to follow her. He couldn't endure the gnawing uncertainty any longer. When Clara left the house, Gerard waited a few minutes and got into his car. He followed her from a distance, careful not to draw attention. She parked near an elegant building with a modest sign that read, Elixir SBA. He stopped nearby and watched as she walked inside. Gerard stayed in the car for a few more minutes, contemplating his next move. Then he decided it was time to act. He entered the SBA salon, where a receptionist greeted him. "Good morning. Do you have an appointment?" she asked politely. "No, but I'd like to learn more about your services," he replied, trying to remain calm. The receptionist began describing the regular massages, aromatherapy, and relaxation treatments. Gerard listened, but his eyes darted around, searching for any trace of Clara. "Is Sebastian Gray available right now?" he asked suddenly. The receptionist looked at him more attentively. "Yes, but he's currently with a client. You can book an appointment with him for another day." "And who is his client?" Gerard asked cautiously, feigning indifference. "I'm sorry, but we don't disclose such information." Her smile grew more formal. Gerard nodded, but decided to wait for Clara to leave. He took a seat at a cafe across the street, where he had a clear view of the salon's entrance. Time dragged on. Over an hour passed before Clara finally emerged from the salon. She looked relaxed, and a smile played on her face. Gerard felt his heart tighten with pain. What was going on in there? He decided not to reveal his hand just yet. He didn't have enough information for now, but his suspicions were only growing stronger. His next step was to find out who Sebastian Gray really was and what role he played in Clara's life. Gerard couldn't get the name Sebastian Gray out of his mind. The next morning, after downing several cups of coffee, he sat at his computer and began searching for information. He typed the name into a search engine and found the SBA Salons page. Sebastian was listed among the staff, with a brief description. A highly skilled massage therapist with years of experience in relaxation techniques. But that wasn't enough. A search through social media revealed more details. On his professional page, Sebastian posted photos with clients, carefully avoiding personal details, motivational quotes, and a few videos of his sessions, explaining massage techniques. But nothing incriminating or specific stood out. Gerard then decided to call the SBA salon under a fake name, pretending to be a potential client. "Good morning. I'm interested in Sebastian Gray's services. I've heard he's the best in town. Does he offer any unique treatments for his clients?" The receptionist responded politely. "Yes, Mr. Gray specializes in comprehensive treatments with a deep relaxation effect. His clients are very satisfied with the results. Is this something standard, or does he have special programs?" There was a brief pause on the other end of the line before the receptionist replied in a more reserved tone. "All details are discussed in person. You can schedule a consultation." This response only deepened Gerard's doubts. The next time Clara announced that she was going to another massage session, Gerard was ready. He called his old friend Thomas, a private investigator. "I need your help. This is personal. I need to know what my wife is doing at this salon." Thomas was initially surprised but then agreed. He promised to conduct his own investigation and find out if there was anything hidden behind the doors of Elixir SBA. A few days later, Thomas returned with some information. I found out that Sebastian Gray is officially licensed. Everything is above board. But there are rumors in the salon that some clients receive more than just standard services. You know what I mean. Gerard clenched his fists but kept listening. However, the most interesting part, Thomas continued, I checked the surveillance footage near the salon. Take a look. He showed several photos. In one of them, Clara was leaving the salon with Sebastian. They stood close, talking, and Sebastian handed her a small package. What does this mean? Gerard asked, trying to contain his anger. I can't say for sure yet, but there's reason to believe this wasn't just post-massage small talk. Gerard decided not to wait any longer. He booked a massage with Sebastian Gray to see for himself what was really happening at the salon. When Gerard arrived at Elixir SBA, the receptionist kindly escorted him to the treatment room. The session began, and everything seemed perfectly ordinary. Professional movements from the masseur, a calm atmosphere, and soft music. But Gerard's thoughts were entirely elsewhere. After the session ended, Gerard left the room, pretending to head home. Instead, he stayed in the building, carefully hiding in the shadows of the hallway. A few minutes later, he heard Clara's familiar voice coming from another room. Gerard approached the door, his heart pounding wildly. Slowly, he opened it, seeing a scene that shook him to his core. Clara was lying on the massage table, looking completely relaxed, while Sebastian was finishing a regular massage. But at that moment, he leaned down and whispered something in her ear, causing a faint smile to appear on her face. Their movements seemed unusually intimate. What the hell is going on here? Gerard shouted as he stepped into the room. Clara jumped, her face frozen in shock. Gerard, what are you doing here? She exclaimed. Sebastian, maintaining complete composure, raised his hands. Mr. Gerard, this is just a procedure. Please calm down. Everything is under control. Under control? Gerard yelled. This is what you call just a massage? Clara got up from the table, trying to speak. It's not what you think. I come here to relax, nothing more. Relax? Gerard interrupted, pointing his finger at Sebastian. And he helps you with that? Sebastian, still unruffled, replied. My job is to create comfort for my clients. This is a standard procedure, nothing more. But Gerard couldn't take it anymore. He turned and stormed out of the room without saying another word. Clara ran after him, but he was already near the salon's doors. Gerard, please, listen to me, she pleaded. Enough, Clara, he replied coldly. I don't know why you hid this from me, but I can't trust you anymore. He left the salon without another word, realizing he no longer wanted to be part of this happy ending. Back home, Gerard sat in silence. His head was filled with thoughts and resentment. Clara, the woman he trusted more than anyone, had deceived him. Her explanations about an ordinary massage no longer held any weight. His trust had shattered into pieces, replaced by anger, disappointment, and a desire for justice. He opened the window, letting in the cool evening breeze, which seemed to reflect his mood, cold and sharp. He looked up at the sky, now covered with clouds, and whispered to himself, how could she do this? Why? What did I do wrong? Gerard took a deep breath and tried to focus. He knew he couldn't simply erase this from his memory. Every detail of what he had seen at the salon gnawed at his soul. Clara's expression, her relaxed demeanor, Sebastian's tone, it all haunted him. But instead of sinking into despair, Gerard began thinking about how to make Clara regret it. Various scenarios began forming in his mind, from complete indifference to carefully planned revenge. She should have known that trust isn't something you can play with, he said aloud, staring out the window. His voice was calm, but it carried a steely resolve. Memories started pulling him back to moments from their happy life together. He recalled how they first met at a mutual friend's party. Clara had been smiling, lively, and charming. Her green-brown eyes sparkled, and she seemed to him the best woman he could ever meet. They talked all night, discussing everything from music to dreams about the future. Remembering those moments only deepened his pain. How could everything change so drastically? What had made her seek solace elsewhere? Gerard suspected that part of the blame might lie with him. Perhaps he hadn't been as attentive as before or missed her signals. But that didn't excuse her actions. Gerard picked up a sheet of paper and a pen. His thoughts began taking the form of a plan. He decided not to act impulsively. If he wanted Clara to feel everything he was feeling now, he needed to act smart. Step 1. Find out more about Sebastian. Who was he, really? Did he have other clients receiving special services? Gerard planned to uncover this and use it against him. Step 2. Prepare a trap for Clara. She needed to understand that his trust was broken. But he didn't want a confrontation. No, he wanted her to realize what she had done on her own. Step 3. Ensure her friends and colleagues learned about this story. He intended to act cautiously but persistently. As Gerard thought, he suddenly realized he was still clutching the bracelet Clara had accidentally left on the table before leaving. It was the same bracelet he'd first noticed, the one that had sparked his doubts. Now, this bracelet had become a symbol of her lies. It all started with this, he muttered, placing the bracelet on the table. And it will all end with this. Gerard sat in the dark room, focused on his computer, studying all the available information about Sebastian. That night, he found no peace, as every moment and every detail of what had happened told him that Clara was only part of something much bigger. Sebastian, this enigmatic man, seemed to be the key. That's why Gerard decided this would be his first step. After hours of digging through public records and social media, Gerard uncovered several key details. Sebastian was the owner of several private clubs catering to wealthy clients and had a reputation among women seeking special services. Those with money and status often sought out people like him. The information Gerard found was clear. Sebastian had several clients, and all of them received services that were difficult to explain without delving into a world where money could buy any desire. But this was just the beginning. Gerard realized there were many more hidden connections Clara hadn't revealed. He decided to proceed with his plan. Step 2 involved setting a trap for Clara. Gerard no longer wanted direct confrontation. He didn't need to prove she had betrayed him. He wanted her to come to that realization herself. He began gathering information about her social circle, checking all her meetings, messages, and calls, gradually weaving a web she wouldn't be able to escape. While Clara continued living her life, Gerard started taking action. He involved friends and acquaintances, creating situations where Clara might accidentally encounter hints or mentions of her connection with Sebastian. This was a subtle, careful process. Gerard didn't want her to immediately realize he was behind it. His goal was for her to face her actions and be unable to avoid the consequences. Step 3 was to ensure that everyone important to Clara found out about her connection with Sebastian. He didn't plan to do this openly, no. Gerard was cautious. He started by discussing casual rumors with people who might know Clara or her colleagues. He dropped small hints in conversations, weaving them into everyday interactions. Sooner or later, she would find herself in a situation where even her closest friends would ask her questions she couldn't avoid answering. Gerard wasn't seeking revenge, but he knew justice had to be restored. Even if it meant leaving Clara in a state of uncertainty, doubt, and despair, he was ready to see it through to the end. Everyone connected to her betrayal needed to know the truth. He found no pleasure in what he was doing. He wasn't chasing the thrill of revenge. No, his goal was justice. And justice demanded that Clara feel the full weight of her actions, that she understood she had lost not only his trust but also her ability to manipulate those around her. The process had begun weeks ago when Gerard decided to investigate Sebastian. Now, he had a clear picture of every move Clara could make and every situation he could exploit to slowly, yet inevitably, prepare her for the moment when she would lose everything. That day, Clara arrived wearing her favorite black coat. Her steps were light but unusually cautious. She always appeared carefree, but Gerard noticed a new look in her eyes, doubt, anxiety. He didn't respond to her initial greeting, instead glancing at her before placing a package on the table. From the moment she entered, the atmosphere shifted. This was the moment when everything was about to change. "This is for you," he said calmly, not looking at her. She took the package but didn't immediately open it. Instead, she looked at Gerard, silently waiting. She was bracing herself for whatever was coming. "What is this?" she asked, though her voice sounded different, not confident but tinged with fear. Gerard didn't answer her question, simply gesturing toward the package. Clara cautiously opened it and found a disc inside. Its lack of any visible label or logo did nothing to reassure her. "These are recordings." "Your recordings," he said, as if emphasizing the importance of every word. "I don't understand what you're talking about," she replied, but her voice had already begun to tremble. Gerard picked up one of the discs and tossed it onto the table in front of her. Clara flinched. He was ready, and so was she. "Maybe you should watch them," he said, his voice devoid of anger or joy, just firm and filled with disdain. Clara desperately began flipping through the papers on the table, trying to find some explanation for this. She was attempting to collect herself, but each moment only reminded her that she was trapped. There was no way to avoid what was coming next. Gerard slowly stood and walked toward the window. His gaze was fixed on the horizon, but his thoughts remained on Clara. He no longer felt hostility, though a few weeks ago, she had meant everything to him. Now, her image was tarnished, and he realized he could no longer repair what had been broken. "Clara," he said, turning to her, "I'm not blaming you for betraying me. You did it to achieve your own goals. But I won't stay silent. You need to understand that there are things that cannot be undone." She looked at him, her face filled with confusion, but he also saw fear and desperation. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Do you want to destroy me?" "No," he replied firmly. "I just want you to understand the truth. And the way you've chosen to manipulate people won't go without consequences." Clara raised her eyes, and now her gaze held not only fear but an attempt to understand how she had fallen into this trap. Gerard wasn't done yet, and he could see how each of her movements betrayed her vulnerability. He didn't want to hurt her, but she needed to know that her actions wouldn't go unpunished. Meanwhile, Gerard continued his watchful observation. He shared the recordings with a few trusted acquaintances who began planning how to, casually, spread them among those who might take an interest in Clara's activities. Within days, the recordings were circulating in different social circles, and soon rumors began to spread. Clara found out when some of her colleagues openly questioned her about her connections with Sebastian. They didn't know all the details, but it was enough to push Clara to reflect on who her real friends were. The next day, when she tried to justify herself to them, she was met only with distrust and coldness. Her relationships with her friends began to crumble. Everyone started seeing her in a different light. Meanwhile, Gerard watched the process closely, like a cold observer, but he understood that Clara couldn't withstand it. Once society began doubting her integrity, she lost her position among those who once supported her. Clara spent several sleepless nights. She could no longer avoid the consequences of her actions, and while she tried to muster the strength to justify herself, she knew it was hopeless. Gerard had accomplished his goal. He didn't want to destroy her. He simply wanted her to understand that manipulation and betrayal always come with a price. He was ready to leave her, but also ready to watch as she crumbled under the weight of her own lies. After weeks of solitude, Clara realized her life would never be the same again. Gerard was right. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. Clara sat in a dimly lit corner of a cafe, staring at her reflection on the glassy surface of the table. She couldn't shake the weight that had been bearing down on her in recent days. It felt like a dream where every step was hopelessly wrong, and every move a struggle with her own conscience. Gerard had yet to come to the conversation she had been longing for. Now, she felt that moment was inevitably approaching. Clara had always been strong, always kept her emotions in check. But today, after receiving Gerard's final warning, the recorded conversation with Sebastian, it became unbearable. She didn't know if she could explain everything to him, but this time she couldn't remain silent. When Gerard entered the cafe, his gaze immediately found hers. She sat as if the world around her had ceased to exist, and only this moment mattered. Gerard silently sat across from her, his expression heavy with emotion. "You came," Clara said, slightly surprised. but there was unease in her voice. "I came because you wanted to talk," Gerard replied calmly, though his eyes seemed to already know all the answers. Clara took a deep breath, summoning the strength to start. Her heart raced, and her voice trembled. "Gerard, I should have told you this a long time ago, and I want you to understand. I didn't go to Sebastian because I enjoyed what we did, but because I was struggling with us. Our relationship changed, and I didn't know how to tell you," Clara said quickly, afraid to stop. "I felt lonely, and what we were going through was suffocating me." Gerard listened intently, not interrupting. His gaze was cold but focused. He didn't rush to conclusions, though every word she spoke hit him like a hammer. "You didn't tell me this," he said, his voice calm but tinged with pain. "Why? Why didn't you just tell me?" "I was scared." Her voice rose as she tried to explain. "I was scared you wouldn't understand. I was scared you'd feel guilty. I didn't want to hurt you, Gerard. I thought it was better to keep it to myself than to tell you and destroy everything." Gerard studied her more closely, his expression softening slightly, though his trust hadn't fully returned. "But that doesn't excuse your actions, Clara. You don't have the right to seek someone else to fulfill your needs without telling me. I thought we were together, that we were a team." Clara seemed to want to say something, but her lips remained silent. She lowered her head, feeling her heart break under the weight of guilt. She knew he was right, but at the same time, she couldn't undo what she had done. "It was just a massage, Gerard. And even if Sebastian made me feel good, it doesn't mean I wanted him. It was just an attempt to relax. And I understand you might see it differently, but it wasn't what you think it was." "What do you mean by an attempt to relax?" Gerard struggled to understand how this could be justified. It sounded like self-deception, but he tried to remain calm. "I couldn't handle what was happening between us, Gerard," she explained, choosing her words carefully. "There was so much emptiness in our romantic life that I didn't know how to fill it. I didn't want to hurt you. I just didn't know how to talk to you about it." Gerard leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes for a few seconds as he processed her words. His thoughts were tangled. Clara was being honest, but her words confused him even more. "You're looking for excuses," he said, though his tone lacked the sharp edge it had before. "You're trying to explain your actions, but that doesn't make them right. You betrayed me, Clara." "I know," she said quietly, raising her eyes to meet his, "and I want to apologize. I want you to know it wasn't about you. It was about me. My insecurities, my weakness. I couldn't make you love me the way I needed. I was afraid you wouldn't understand me, and so I tried to find a way to cope on my own." Gerard sighed, his gaze calmer now, though the pain remained. He realized Clara wasn't a betrayer in the conventional sense. It was an attempt to deal with the emotional distance their relationship had developed. But that didn't change the fact that she had deceived him. "I understand," he said, his voice softer but still distant. "You should have been honest with me, not sought comfort in someone else's hands. I know. I should have told you. I realize now that I've destroyed everything. And I'm not asking you to forgive me now. I just want you to know the truth. I don't want you to think I betrayed you. I wasn't looking for someone else. I was looking for myself." Gerard listened to her carefully, but he still didn't know what to do with this truth. He was surprised that it was both so simple and so complex at the same time. His love for Clara still lingered somewhere deep in his heart, but he couldn't immediately return to what they once had. "I don't know if I can get through this, Clara," he said after a pause, "but I need to think about it. I need time." Clara bowed her head, realizing there was nothing more she could do to restore what they had. She heard his words but understood that she couldn't change what had already happened. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Two hearts that had once beat as one now seemed miles apart. Gerard woke up early the next morning, staring at the ceiling of the hotel room. It felt empty, and he wasn't yet used to being alone in this cold space. This was the first day after their conversation, and although Clara hadn't left him, he felt the distance growing between them. Their relationship, once full of passion and understanding, now seemed hollow. The time he had spent with her felt like it had dissolved into the night fog. All her explanations and justifications, he still didn't know if he could understand or accept them. After leaving Clara at home, Gerard had checked into a hotel to take a break. He needed time to think and make the right decision. All the conversations, the betrayal, and the doubts felt like a heavy stone weighing him down. Clara's emotional coldness was like invisible chains binding them together, and Gerard couldn't understand why she hadn't been honest with him earlier. Why hadn't she just told him outright that something was wrong, instead of seeking out strangers to fill the emptiness in her heart? But what now? Should he try to save the relationship, or should he leave it behind? Gerard couldn't find an answer. He felt he couldn't just let Clara go without at least trying to resolve their problems. So, he suggested they see a sex therapist to figure out together whether there was a chance to save their relationship, or if it was just a way to delay the inevitable. Clara reluctantly agreed to the therapy session. She was still in inner turmoil, unsure whether she truly wanted to save the relationship or was merely trying to avoid the pain of separation. Both of them went to the specialist, hoping for a miracle that might help them rebuild their connection. The session proved far more challenging than Gerard had anticipated. The specialist tried to delve into the depths of their feelings and uncover why they had lost their bond. Gerard listened to Clara intently, but her words didn't inspire him. They sounded like yet another attempt to justify herself rather than a genuine desire to change. Their communication had become distant and cold. After the session, they drove home in silence. That evening, sitting on the couch, Clara finally tried to speak. "Gerard, I understand this is hard for you. I understand why you're reacting this way, but I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't mean to betray you." But Gerard was no longer the same. All her words seemed shallow to him. They couldn't achieve what he had hoped for. A few days later, Gerard received a message from an unknown number. It was short, but shook him to his core. "She's cheating on you with Sebastian. Don't believe what she's told you." A wave of anger washed over Gerard. He had suspected Clara was lying to him, but this message, like a definitive confirmation, compelled him to act. Now he had a reason to dig deeper. He couldn't just sit and wait for Clara to end up in Sebastian's arms again. He decided to go to the same SBA salon Clara often visited and keep an eye on her movements. He tried to leave his emotions behind, focusing only on uncovering the truth. It was his only chance. That day, filled with determination, Gerard returned to the SBA salon. This place had long become a symbol of suspicion for him, where he kept finding evidence that Clara was deceiving him. But this time, he had a concrete goal. He didn't just want to observe her. He wanted to put an end to this uncertain and painful chapter in their lives. He couldn't stay in the dark any longer. He needed to know if Clara and Sebastian had a romantic connection. In the lounge, he saw her. Clara was sitting next to Sebastian. They weren't just sitting together. There was an obvious closeness between them that resembled a romantic relationship more than simple friendship. Sebastian leaned toward Clara, whispering something softly, and she listened to him with a smile, almost enchanted. Then, his hand brushed against her wrist as he gently caressed it. Clara laughed, her gaze filled with tenderness, the kind he had only seen before between lovers. It was the kind of connection that broke Gerard's heart. But Gerard couldn't leave it at that. He tried to stay composed, but the pain growing in his chest forced him to act. His inner turmoil mixed with anger. When they moved to a private room, Gerard followed them, leaving his anger behind for now. He heard their voices through the door, but then came strange sounds that made his heart stop. This couldn't be happening. Realizing what was happening, Gerard couldn't hold back anymore. All his previous attempts to convince himself that Clara couldn't have done this crumbled. He felt his heart tighten with pain and anger. He couldn't stay silent any longer. Gerard ran to the door of the room, not thinking about what he was doing. He tore it open and stormed inside, and what he saw confirmed his worst fears. The scene before him was not just a betrayal. It was the destruction of all his hopes. Clara was sitting on Sebastian's lap as he held her and kissed her neck. It was a moment Gerard knew he would never be able to forget, even if he wanted to. All he felt in that instant was betrayal, pain, and a wave of anger washing over him. The romantic scene needed no words. It was clear Clara and Sebastian were far too close. Gerard couldn't believe his eyes. "Traitor!" he shouted, the word bursting from his throat like a thunderclap. Clara jumped, feeling the full force of his shout. Sebastian quickly pulled away from her, and her face twisted in shock and despair. "Gerard, wait. It's not what you think," her voice echoed in the room, but she already knew it was too late to prevent his heartbreak. Gerard looked at her with fury. Whatever she tried to explain no longer mattered. All her words sounded like empty excuses. "How could you?" His voice came out as a condemning verdict. "How could you do this to me? You were mine, Clara. Mine. And now this?" Clara took a step forward, but he stepped back. "Gerard, it's not like that. I'm not cheating on you. I just... Just what?" he interrupted, unable to listen any longer. "I saw you, Clara, and you knew. You promised me you wouldn't be with him. And here you are, with him, as if nothing happened." Her face was streaked with tears, and her hands were trembling as she hid them behind her back, not knowing what to do. "Gerard, I was scared to tell you," she exclaimed, her voice shaking. I couldn't admit to you that things between us haven't been right for so long. I couldn't. I didn't want to lose you, but I couldn't live like this anymore," she said, desperately trying to find words to explain herself. "I wasn't stopping you, Clara," he said, his voice filled with pain he could no longer contain. "I wasn't stopping you from being yourself, but you should have been honest with me. You chose this path. Go ahead and walk it with him. I'm leaving." Clara couldn't respond. She just stood there, unable to believe what was happening. Then Gerard, without saying another word, turned and left the room. Leaving the SBA salon, Gerard felt like his entire world was falling apart. He couldn't stay in that place where everything had unraveled. Clara was no longer his. All his hopes and dreams, their shared plans, were shattered the moment he saw her with Sebastian. He returned home, but he already knew it was no longer his place. This was the end of their relationship. He began packing his things, preparing to leave. Clara was still in that room with Sebastian, and even if she was crying, it didn't change the fact that he couldn't stay with her any longer. When Gerard got back to the apartment, he felt nothing but emptiness. He quietly entered the space that had once been his home, the place where he had built plans for a future with Clara. Every step, every object around him reminded him of what they had, at least what he thought they had. But now it was all gone. Now it was just part of the past. He walked through the rooms, gathering his belongings. Their shared memories, the photos they'd framed together, the items from their trips, the books they had chosen as a couple, all of it had lost its meaning. He could have left it all behind, but every item reminded him of her betrayal, of everything he had lost. Having packed what he needed, Gerard made a decision that even surprised himself. He wasn't just leaving. He wanted to erase everything from his life. He didn't just want to leave the apartment. He wanted to sell it. The home he had once planned to share with Clara had become a symbol of betrayal. His heart broke every time he thought about how she had roamed these rooms with Sebastian, while he trusted her and hoped for something greater. But now it was just a house for two people who could no longer be together. Gerard contacted real estate agents and finalized the sale. The house was gone, and it was a definitive decision. He kept nothing that reminded him of her face, her voice, or her tears. She could no longer be a part of his life, and though it was hard, he tried to forget every moment associated with her. But Clara couldn't just let go. She couldn't understand what had happened or why Gerard had suddenly disappeared from her life. At first, she thought it was her fault, that it was all because of her, because she couldn't be honest with him. She tried to reach out, to explain that it wasn't betrayal, that her connection with Sebastian didn't mean anything. She hoped Gerard would give her a chance to make things right. She sent him messages, called him, but Gerard didn't respond. He disappeared as soon as he sold the house. He changed his address, disconnected his phone, and cut off all contact. Clara realized it wasn't just his anger, it was something more. It was a step that completely severed their connection. He wasn't ready for reconciliation and didn't want to hear any more of her excuses. At first, she tried to convince herself that maybe he was simply tired of everything that had happened. But the more time passed, the more she realized Gerard had done it consciously. He hadn't just left. He had destroyed everything they had built together. He was no longer a part of her world. Her attempts to contact him were fruitless. She called his old numbers, wrote letters, and even hired private investigators to find out where he was. But it was all in vain. He never responded. Clara began to understand that she had become a stranger to him. He had erased himself from her life. His response to her betrayal wasn't just an act of anger. It was a refusal to be part of her life in any way. He took everything from her. Her hopes of repairing their relationship, their future, their shared dreams. Having lost all connection with Gerard, Clara fell into a depression. Her world began to crumble. The home that had once been a place where she felt safe became a symbol of her greatest mistakes. Every corner reminded her of what she had lost, of how she had betrayed someone who truly loved her. She couldn't gather her thoughts. And when her attempts to reach Gerard failed, she finally understood. It was all over. Now, with her life emptied, Clara began to realize her choices had destroyed everything. She had nothing left but her memories of Gerard and an empty house where there was no longer any trace of him or their shared future. A few weeks after leaving Clara and selling the house, Gerard decided to change his life. He took a leave from work and set off on a journey. It was his first step toward finding new horizons and, perhaps, discovering a new understanding of the world. He spent several months in Italy, a country where every street seemed steeped in history and where he found reflections of himself in every landscape. His journey wasn't just an escape from pain. It was a deep dive into his soul. Each day felt like a new page in his life. He began to find peace among the ancient cities and breathtaking scenery, realizing that life didn't have to revolve around the past. The beginning was hard. Echoes of Clara's laughter, her tears, and her words still haunted him. But over time, those memories grew quieter until he could finally let them go. In Italy, Gerard didn't just enjoy the views. He developed new interests. He signed up for photography classes, immersed himself in the local culture, and slowly began to feel alive again. He wasn't looking for new relationships because he knew he first needed to find himself. His inner balance had been shattered, and only with time did he understand that to be ready for something new, he first had to accept himself. When Gerard returned home, he was a changed man. He no longer felt the anger or pain that had tormented him before. He had let go of everything connected to Clara. He had no intention of seeking her out or trying to explain anything. She needed to move on with her life, just as he did. Back home, Gerard began a new chapter in his career. During this time, he focused on his personal growth, engaged in self-improvement, and started volunteering to help others. He found peace within his soul. Now, he was ready to live a full life, free from the pain that had once consumed his heart. Gerard became strong, independent, and calm again. And though Clara still occasionally appeared in his dreams, he knew his place was no longer in her life. When the past was left behind, he finally felt he was on the path to a new life. His revenge wasn't about showing Clara his strength, but about becoming a better person despite her. Even when Gerard thought of Clara and their years together, he knew it was part of his journey that had taught him valuable lessons. And those lessons became the foundation for his future. What would have been the right outcome for both characters?